Hello everyone, I hope you guys are doing good. Well, in today's session, I'll be covering more about SR9K series and its features. The today's agenda it will be today's agenda of this particular session is gonna be the part of the iOS XR architecture, modularity, its scalability, stability, security, software package, classic versus XR 6.0. Its command line interface, configuration management, the tools which we'll be using for monitoring and troubleshooting purpose, example configuration, sample configuration, and RPL, route policy change. About the modularity and software package, evaluation of router OS, we have iOS. You guys must be aware of the Cisco devices or Cisco router switches which are generally using iOS, but however being said that we've got Cisco SR routers or Cisco SR switches which will be using iOS XR. And what is the difference between iOS and iOS XR is nothing but like iOS does support centralized infrastructure and iOS XR does support distributed infrastructure. iOS does support centralized application. iOS XR does support distributed application. iOS supports monolithic kernel. I mean, it is comprised of monolithic kernel. iOS XR is comprised of microkernel. And everything in iOS it does have hardware access, but however being said that iOS XR we've got the limited access to the hardware. So what exactly is the kernel? Kernel is something which is nothing but the so-called process or the program which has been already developed by the developers to have the communication between the so-called applications and uh, CPU and the memory and the device drivers. So when you talk about operating system, we've got the three main components. The first component is gonna be the application. The second component is gonna be the kernel. It could be monolithic kernel or microkernel. And third will be the one which will be comprised of device drivers, CPU, and memory. So when you talk about memory, we've got a RAM and ROM. When you think about the device drivers, we do have device driver. Each and every OS does have its own device drivers. And apart from that, we do have CPU. So to have communication between those three components and applications, the front end and back end, you can say, we use kernel. So it's a medium, it's a process, it's a programming language. So when you say monolithic kernel and microkernel is, as the name suggests, it's micro, it's small. Monolithic, it is large. You can extend that. It is very fast, but however micro is very slow. However, also being said that monolithic, if one component fails, each and every system, the entire process, the language, the entire program fails. In micro, it is not like that. However, iOS does support centralized infrastructure, centralized applications. iOS XR does support distributed infrastructure, distributed applications. iOS does have hardware access. iOS XR does have limited access to the hardware. So in iOS XR, we've got the control plane, management plane, and data plane. In iOS XR software packaging, it does not use single file. It has got library which will be taking care of memory management, how the memory is going to get shared or loaded and unloaded as needed. Package installation envelope, PIE, are delivery mechanism for packages. The Mini is the core composite package that contains mandatory software to boot iOS XR. So when you talk about the software package, you got the mandatory one and the optional one. In mandatory, you've got the main routing protocols, the forwarding plane that you will be using for the protocols that you're going to use. Then you got the line card drivers, you got the base, and you got the admin, and the parts of OS, of course, the entire OS. That's the mandatory one. The OS, base, admin, forwarding, line card drivers, and routing. So when you talk about OS, you've got the kernel, file system, memory management, and lots of stuff which is part of OS, of course. Admin is something which is related to rack, fabric, and line cards. Base is something which is related to sysdb database, interface manager, checkpoint services, and configuration management. When you talk about line card, of course, drivers, forwarding, which is related to QoS, access list, ARP, FIB, forwarding information base, and etc. And you've got the routing protocols as usual that you will be using for the configuration. In optional, if you want to buy new features like MPLS, multicasting, advanced video, BNG, security, documentation, lawful intercept, and all other features, you need to buy those with the upgraded version of iOS. You will be getting all those in that package. So iOS XR, you got the in iOS XR mini package, you got the basic things included like OS, base, admin, line card, drivers, forwarding logic, and routing protocols. In XR versioning, you got the major release, maintenance release. So when you talk about the route processor and the SMU, you got the standby route processor and the main route processor. You got the line card, and you do have SC. So when you talk about the software maintenance upgrade, unlike when you do upgrades, iOS upgrades, what you generally do is you download the file from the Cisco website, the iOS version or the latest iOS version, whichever the version that your company wants you to upgrade to, and you will be using TFTP or FTP server, and you will be transferring that from TFTP to FTP server to the flash, and then you will be using one command to have it, or to have it to have that to get upgraded to the version that you would like to have, and you will be rebooting the so-called device. However, being said that, there is this one more process which is called as ISSU, in which you can upgrade the iOS of XR SR series iOS XR to the latest version without disturbing the so-called running processes of the device. So after copying that file, the iOS file from TFTP to flash, you can simply check the so-called iOS version which has been stored in flash. You have to process a command dir flash one, or whichever flash that you've got, flash card you've got. Then you have to use command boot system switch all, and you can check the show boot, and simply then later on reload. But however, being said that for ISSU upgrade, and there is a bit different process. So the main commands that we will be using is nothing but admin install, add, admin install, activate. Those are the two commands which we will be using to upgrade the iOS without disturbing the running application of SR 9K series. There are a couple of models which will be supporting this particular process, this particular feature. So to check the current package that you are using, you need to process the command show install package is 0. You can check show install active and you'll come to know what are the packages that you've got in the system. So being said that, I've got this one video from Cisco CPOC which has been uploaded by the so-called channel that has been displayed over here on the screen, and it's kind of a bit more understandable, and you guys will come to know what exactly happens when you upgrade the iOS of SR 9K. So I'll be covering a bit about it. You can later on check the entire process in detail. Well, this channel belongs to Kashish Golani, I suppose. He has got this lab. He is using Spirent for traffic management, and he has got 9010 and 9006. He will be upgrading the iOS XR version from 4.0 to 4.1 of 9006 switches he has got. Well, in this, he is explaining that, or she is explaining that we've got this aspirant software wherein you will come to know if the so-called traffic is getting dropped or not. Well, she's talking about that the so-called iOS XR version, the latest version, has been already downloaded and been transferred to disk zero in tar format. You need to use admin install add command. To have it activated, you need to use admin install activate and the so-called file, and then you need to mention that you are using ISSU process. After mentioning ISSU, you need to mention synchronous prompt none, or whichever the option that you would like to use. You want to have prompts and you want to take your own decisions, then of course you'll be getting prompted. But you don't want to have uh, you know any interruption while it is processing the entire upgrade, then of course it's gonna be none. Before upgrading, you need to check those couple of the peculiar points, like you need to check for the show platform, whether each and every state, the so-called line cards, they are up and running. You have to check for the redundancy. You have to check for the memory space. You should have 845 MB. Well, she has been explaining about the verification that you need to follow, wherein this particular PDF that she has downloaded from cisco.com, before upgradation of iOS XR version using ISSU process, there are a couple of things that you need to cross check. You can download that PDF from Cisco and check for the same before doing any kind of upgrade. Well, since it's kind of taking a bit very long, around half an hour it took for an entire upgrade, she has mentioned that it took only 7 seconds for it's not failover as such, but for upgradation. to have it booted from the current version to the latest version. Over here, she has mentioned the drop count, only 7 seconds, but okay, and that was the those are the details that I wanted to share with you. About architecture, of course, you've got the line card, switch fabric, route switch processor, and chassis. When you talk about in slot chassis, you'll be getting 8 line cards. Line card might be comprised of 8 into 10 gig, 40 into gig, 4 into 10 gig. You can also opt for the 4 line cards. You've got the fans and power supply. The future of SR K9K is that it will be supporting 400 Gbps speed line card, 40 ATG line card, 400G system. So to support 400G, you need to have the corresponding power supply and the fan trays. So you can opt for the line card scale options right from low to high. Also, it does support SFP modules. That's the module and that's a slot. So this is more about switch fabric redundancy and control plane and its details. But you don't have to get that deep into the chassis structure and the so-called mechanism which is used in control plane data plane from by the switch fabric and the so-called the entire mechanism of network processors and fabric interface, unless and until you want to become subject matter expert. Mm, let's check more about SR9K in 3D version. This is a 3D model of 9010. Uh, I tried to You can say I try to log into the page which has been displayed on the screen, but I think they have removed that 3D model from that location, and since uh, I'm not sure for what reason, but then cause of that I was not able to get the so-called 3D version of the same. But this is a video that which I've got from YouTube, and the so-called person who's been explaining about the entire chassis and the so-called 3D version of the switch, how it looks, what are the line cards, how you can remove that, how they are placed, the each and every description and the explanation about each and every port and the card has already been mentioned in the so-called presentation or the so-called HTML page that you have got out there. More about XR architecture, security, and process restartability and command line interfaces that we will be using. I'll be covering that in next session. Also about bit about Ansible, Puppet, and the other programming language that we generally use to which are the open source software, of course, with commercial support or add-ons to configure. If you got n number of SR9K, then only you can use that. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense to come up with any kind of programming language like that. Rather, you just can process, or simply use your commands and get it configured by the network administrator. You don't need this automation at all. And because even if you call about the small infrastructure or a big one and the large scale enterprises, they will be using max to max 2 or 3, or not 3, in fact 4. But just for 4 SR9K, you just can't come up with the Ansible or the automation unless and until you are into the global support and you have got centralized management of each and every data center that you are supporting, and you are coming up with your NOC operations, then only you will need this. But that is something which is a part of automation and which we'll be talking later. I'll be covering basic about Ansible and how we create playbooks, but not much. It is not at all that sensible, because when they have came up with Python and Ansible, Puppet, or whichever programming language that they are using, the commands which will be using, that is something which is, I don't know, but it does not sound that sentient or sensible. But however, being said that, they've got the knowledge and they've got the so-called ideas, and they are coming up with their own programming languages and the stuff, they you have to go through the stuff, the same, and upgrade yourself according to the market requirement. Apart from that, yeah, apart from that, of course, we also covering about more about commands that will which will be using. The the configuration command, the basic commands, and more about the configuration sample configurations. What you have to do is nothing but sorry for the disturbance. um, you have to process the same basic command, but after processing that you have to make sure that whatsoever the configuration that you have changed, it is you know according to the requirement and up to the mark, and then you can proceed further, and you have to simply commit. That is what the added advantage in SRK, I suppose. But yeah, unlike I've already mentioned, um, like a 6500 and other the 3750, they've got the different feature. Like when you talk about 3750, you've got the stacking feature. In 6500 you've got the VSS feature. It's the distribution layer, core layer switch. 3750 is the distribution or access layer. You can actually um, take it accordingly. And when you actually, there are a couple of data center which we have seen, which I have came across, wherein they've been using 3750 as a core one, which is not necessary. It can be used at distribution layer, and at core layer you can use Nexus 6500 or 9K series. That's all for today. Apart from this, I suppose we will be talking about, next to next session we'll be talking about the tools that we shall be using for the monitoring. That's it.